when you receive the software out of the box, it will come with 4 folders and modules within those folders. Those folders are project information, communication, contract information, and log information. If you are a user and you may have modified the way that your folders and the way that your modules lay out within your screen, that's not going to change any of the function. It just means that your display may look a little different than my display will work today. The functions that we'll talk about in this session will function exactly the same way, whether yours has been aligned the same as mine or it's been aligned a little bit differently. Okay? We're going to cover Cost Worksheet, the 2 different types of contracts, budgeted contracts and committed contracts, and tell you what the difference in those 2 types of contracts are. We're going to take a look at purchase orders, a quick overview of trends, payment requisitions, change management, which includes proposals and change orders, and then the procurement module, and how all this information relates back to the cost worksheet, because that's going to be your financial overview display tool that you're going to use when tracking the financial information for your projects. Excuse me. Some samples of the documentation that we can find within this folder is going to be details of your contract summaries and your changes, so that you can see all of the changes that are working against your contracts, whether that be a single contract against one project or multiple contracts against a single project. We're going to talk about the procurement module and how you can build a scope sheet inside of contract management and then award contracts based on the bids that you received against that scope sheet within the contract management tool. We're going to talk in detail about the cost worksheet, which is your financial overview display tool that allows you to see where you stand with your budget, your commitments, your actuals, and then your variances that will show you what you have left to spend on your project. And then lastly, we'll talk about the payment requisitions and how the payment requisitions are created, managed against the contract, and then again how that information is displayed in your cost worksheet. Okay. We're going to talk real quickly. I'm going to show you the cost worksheet, and then I'm going to come back and explain these columns. So I'm going to toggle over now over to the application tool. And this is contract management. If you've seen the tool before, you're probably pretty familiar with this display. If it's new for you, to the left here is your project tree. Users will see information within the project tree based on their access permissions. What you have permissions to see, you will see. Over to the right is a detailed workspace that allows you to have shortcuts to various modules and things within the project tree. Okay. For the cost-related items that we're going to discuss, the cost-related items are not displayed on your workspace. The only thing that could possibly be displayed would be your reports. You could put cost reports on your workspace. So everything we're going to do is going to be in the project tree section. We're going to open this folder here called Contract Information. And we're going to start first with this section here called Cost Worksheet. Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have timed out. I apologize for that. Okay. Within our cost worksheet, you would organize some sort of structure or breakdown. And this breakdown can be dependent on the type of project that you're working with. And you can have different cost code breakdowns per project, or you could have similar breakdowns across all projects and then multi-project report against those breakdowns. In this example, we have the cost code structured based on the CSI spec sections. And so I have the division is the first portion of my cost code. The CSI spec section is the middle division of my cost code. And then I have assigned cost categories, things like overhead, direct cost, subcontractor cost, vendor cost. That's what some of these acronyms stand for. You could certainly do a WBS breakdown. You may have your own GL chart of accounts breakdowns. However you wish to define and create these cost codes, you will have the ability to do so. When the customer receives the tool, they will have the ability to go in and create cost code definitions, and that's exactly what I've done with my work. Within the cost code definitions, you would then define the start and the length of the characters, and you would build out the code. And then within the code, you could put vocabulary definitions of what each portion of said code would be defined as. And I'm going to show you why it would be important to do this in just a moment when we look at some layouts. You may have up to 30 characters in your cost code. Okay? So when you break down that cost code, your characters would include spaces, dashes, periods, or your alphanumeric characters, and you have a 30-character limitation. Okay? Once you have that breakdown defined, then you will start to see your dollar values from your other documents within Contract Manager to be displayed in the cost worksheet. We're going to see how this is built in just a little bit, but I just want to give you an overview before I start talking about it back in the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll have our columns of our detail of our cost code, a title of what these cost codes apply to, and then we will start to have our cost value columns. Everything related to your budget contract will be displayed here in the budget set of columns and its associated values. So you can see at a glance, I have a $10 million budget contract against this project. Okay? And so that's what will be displayed here. If I had any approved budget revisions, these are approved change orders, that information will be displayed here. And then the revised budget is the sum total of the original plus the approved. That gives you a new revised budget. That shows you what you're working with currently, including all approved change order documents. If I had any pending revisions, those would show in my pending column. If I had any estimates, so for example, if I had any items in the procurement module that I had estimated that may become a contract or may become a change order document at a later date, I would have estimates recorded here. And then my projected budget is my sum total of my revised budget, which is the original plus the approved, and any unapproved items, so any estimates and pending totals would be included in my projected totals. If I scroll over a little further, then I start to see my commitment columns. Okay? And again, I said we talk about the difference between your budget and your commitment. Your budget is your bank. That's your money that you have to complete the project. If you're functioning as a general contractor, it's the contract between the owner and the general contractor. If you're functioning as an owner and you're utilizing the tool, then it may be your internal budget that you're wishing to track, and you may do budget amendments or something against that kind of information. If you're functioning as a subcontractor and you're using the tool, then it may be the contract relationship between the general contractor and the subcontractor, vendor or supplier, as appropriate. Budget and commitment will always mean the same thing, will always function the same way in the system. It's just dependent on the user of how that contractual relationship actually lays out. In the commitment section of the tool, you're going to see all of your committed contracts. These are the dollars that you're spending. This is what you're essentially writing a check for in relation to your project. So we'll see what we have committed. Okay? And an approved commitment functions much the same way as it does in the budget. These are your approved change orders against your committed contracts. Revised commitment is, again, the sum total of the original plus the approved. The pending commitments and the estimated commitments are unapproved change orders and possible procurement items that have been estimated that would then be summarized and sum totaled within your projected commitment value. Okay. The next two columns that we'll take a look at are actuals received and actuals issued. Since we have two types of contracts, we have two types of payments. Okay. Against the contract on the budget side, there's going to be actuals issued. Those are the bills that we issue to someone to get paid. Okay, so this is the money that's coming into us. This can be noted as our accounts receivable. All right. Actuals received, those are the bills that we receive from some subcontractor, vendor, contractor as appropriate, and those are the bills that we're going to pay out against. Actuals received would be referenced as our accounts payable. Okay. And then we have our variance columns. And what the variance columns tell you is what you have left to spend. All right. So this is the difference between your original budget and your original commitment. Okay. So out of your original budget, this is what you have left to allocate or commit. All right. These could also be viewed as what you have left as profit. So if that's what you're recording is the difference between your budget and your commitment, then becomes your overhead and profit, then those calculations could be listed here as well. Okay. Toggling back to the PowerPoint presentation. The cost worksheet, again, is going to enable you to quickly view the financial status of your project and compare your budgeted, committed, and actual cost values. Understanding how this information is displayed is explained in each of the column definitions shown on the next series of slides. Okay? It's important to note the budget and commitment sections have the same columns. All right? They function the same way. It's just one is against a committed contract and one set is against a budget contract. The values in the budget section represent the money that is allocated to complete the project. For example, again, is a client-general contractor-contract relationship. Okay? It's not limited to that kind of relationship, though. It could also be a general contractor-subcontractor relationship. It could be a budget, internal working budget relationship. Right? The values in the commitment section represent the money that will be spent to complete the project. Again, an example is the general contractor-subcontractor relationship, but as we note, those could be other relationships as well, depending on who the user happens to be. The values in the actual section represent the money you billed versus the money you spent on the project. so that you can see what you've been paid and calculate against what you've been paid out. Okay? The variances represent the difference between the budgeted and the committed column values. Okay? No questions so far?
No questions.
We're good.
Okay. All right. This is a display, again, of some contract comparisons within the cost worksheet. So if I'm tracking my contracts budgeted and my contracts committed, I can see here the first column, original budget and original commitment. These are your original contract values, and we're going to look at a contract inside of Contract Manager in just a moment. The next column, the revised budget and the revised commitment. These, again, are calculated by Oracle Primavera Contract Management, and these include your approved change order values. So these sum totals include your change order values. And then the projected budget and the projected commitment, again, these are calculated by Contract Management, include your approved and pending change orders and any other estimates and adjustments that you may have. The variance shown here in this column, circled up shows you an example of over budget. So the variance is showing you what you have left to allocate. If it were a negative, it would mean that you had over allocated some money in that particular code. Okay? It may not mean that you're over budget overall, but you may be over budget in a single cost code, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay. Excuse me. So here's my code where I'm over budget. It's a negative $30,000. If I go and open up this code, then I can get the details for this particular cost code only. Okay. And if I look at my budgeted tab, I can see that I have an original budget of $35,000. If I go to my committed tab, I see that I have committed by a contract for $65,000. So I'm overcommitted. So at some point I have to make a decision. Do I either change the contract for this particular subcontractor, or do I go in and do a budget amendment to increase my budget amount so that I can get that money to pay the commitment that I've allocated? Okay. And your cost worksheet is going to show you that level of detail at a cost code level breakdown. Excuse me. Okay. Again, so just some definitions of the columns, what the original versus the approved, the revised, the pending, the estimated, the adjustment, and the projected will mean. The original is always going to be what the contract originally contained. The approved will always be approved change orders and nothing else. If it's not approved, it will not be in that column. The revised will always be the sum of the original amount plus the approved changes. The pending could be any potential changes. And by saying potential changes, that could be potential change order documents, no matter what phase of change those documents happen to be in. Estimated, again, would be any document that you have created an estimate for. It could be an RFP. It could be a scope sheet document, any kind of value that has been estimated in the tool. Adjustments, similar to being able to make a journal entry in your accounting system, you can make manual adjustments into your cost worksheet. And then your projected totals are the sum of your original, your approved, your pending, your estimated, and your adjustment columns to show you your potential exposure where you could be financially should all of these other items become an approved state. Okay. So let's look at a commitment overview. I want to see at a glance where I stand with my commitments. These are my subcontracts in this case that I'm working with. And here I have my original contract value. So I have a $358,000 contract on the commitment side, and I have approved commitments of $10,000. The new revised commitment amount of $368,000. I have no pending change orders in place. My original value plus my approved and pending change orders, so my projected and my revised, in this case, happen to be the same because I have no pending. And then my actuals to date, this is what I've actually paid out to date of my particular contract. Okay? So if I were to go and look at this specifically within Contract Manager, I'll show you how the contract shows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Committed Contract module, and I'm going to look at a couple of different things while we're in here so you can see some things that pan out. The first one I'm going to look at is the basic metal materials and methods. Excuse me. Okay. So I have a contract here for $292,500, If I click on my Contract Summary tab, it's going to give me an overview of where I stand with this particular contract. And this is just one contract in my demo project. Okay. At this point, I have no approved changes, right? And I have no actuals to date against this particular contract. Within my line items, excuse me, a $292,000 value, and it is distributed against multiple cost codes in the cost worksheet. So in this case, it is distributed against metal joists, metal deck, cold form metal framing, and metal fabrications. Okay. You will see that against metal joists, we have a total of $49,500 that has been allocated there. All right. If I'm tracking the cost for my contract and I want to look at the detail of my contract summary, I would go to my contract and review my contract summary tab. Okay. If I had any changes, I could go to the changes tab. I would see that information. If I had any payment requisitions or invoices, I would go to those appropriate tabs and review that information. However, if I want to just look at the details specifically for excuse me, my metal joist costs, because maybe I have multiple contracts or multiple contractors performing metal joists on a single project, then I can go to the cost worksheet and I can track the information against just this cost code. So back into my cost worksheet, I'm now going to go to Division 5 and look at metal joist. And when I open that code, I will see here is the contract that it is assigned to. Here's my original commitment value. Okay? And I can see that level of detail within my cost worksheet. Sorry, it went one page too far. Excuse me. Okay. You can see that I have a total commitment of $49,500, and I have a budget of $55,000. So when I scroll over further to my variance columns, I have a difference of $5,500 remaining of my budget that I have left to allocate. Okay. One of the things that hopefully we're working on is that the screen does split left to right within the cost worksheet, which is very helpful. It allows you to have your cost codes and your descriptions to the left and your columns to the right. However, as of now, it doesn't freeze the top rows. So you will probably have to scroll up and then scroll back down a little bit when you're reviewing your columns of information. Any questions so far?
Still good.
Okay.
The only feedback we have, Marianne, is that I think someone's losing your audio a little bit.
Okay.
So I don't know if you could speak up a little bit. Maybe that can alleviate the issue, but it could be a bandwidth issue on anywhere between you and them.
Okay. I'm not on speakerphone. I'm actually holding the telephone.
Okay. I hear you fine. I hear you fine.
Okay. I'll try to be more clear, a little louder. Okay. So the next thing that we'll talk about with relation to the cost is the procurement and the buyout. And what this is going to allow you to do is this module will allow you to create a scope sheet inside of Oracle Primavera Contract Management. It will allow you to calculate bidders and record their bid history against the scope items. And it will allow you to also track minority, women, and disadvantaged business statistics so that you have goal percentages. You can show your awarded percentages and your awarded values against these particular items. Excuse me. And so if we take a look at that module very quickly inside of contract management. Then we can see that we developed a scope sheet, and we put in together an estimate of what we were requesting pricing for, and then we received pricing back from multiple vendors, and then we can select to either choose the lowest price vendor, the vendor that has the most complete bid, however you wish to organize that information, and then from here you could simply award the contract. and then that would pull in the total values and the line items that you've created in the procurement item and place those into the contract. Excuse me. Okay. It can be very detailed. You can put it in a defined scope of work. You can track it against the schedule, and then again you can go to the award tab and you can award it to a particular contract so that you don't have to rekey all the information that you created when you created the bid document. Okay. These totals will fall in the estimated column on the cost worksheet. Okay, so everything's always going to tie back to the cost worksheet. Right. Revisiting again, the two modules within contract management that you're going to be working with relation to contracts are the budgeted contracts that represent the money you have to work with to complete the project, and the committed contracts represent the money you spend to complete the project. Okay. More detail of your contract overview. We'll go in and take a look at an in-depth version of the contract, and you will see that you will be able to review from the Contract Summary tab the details of all the changes, the invoices or the payment requisitions, whichever you choose to work with, and the details of the line items and how those line items are categorized or distributed to some cost code, and then again displayed in the cost worksheet. Excuse me. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Okay. Let's take a look at our budget, and then we'll come back to the commitments in a moment. So here's the budget of our contract. If I open up my budget contract and see its associated detail, okay, I see that I started with a $10 million budget contract. However, in my contract summary, I can see that I now have approved changes. Okay, and I also have some actuals. So these are the bills that I actually sent to my owner, because these are the bills that I issued for payment. If you're in a different kind of contract arrangement, then you may not have an owner that you're going to submit your bills to, and so you may not have any actuals against your budget contract. That's perfectly acceptable within the contract management tool. If I look at the detail of my changes tab, I can see where my $10,000 value came from. Here's my approved changes. You see that I also have some potential changes sitting out here. These are things that have yet to be approved. Okay? It may be important when you're reviewing your contract to know what has been approved and what is yet to be approved, because if these items were to get approved, it would change your overall contract value. Right? And then again, my payment requisitions. I can show what has been paid and completed and stored to date. All right? This is not intended to replace your accounting system. It does not cut checks. All right? It may be possible for you to write integration between the contract management tool and your accounting system, but out of the box, it's not going to do that function for you. What it's intended to do is give you, as a project manager, the financial overview of your project so that you don't always have to go to accounting to receive that information. You should have that information here. It also provides a tool for which you can reconcile against your accounting system, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, so that the project management system and the accounting system can then come to some agreement and make sure that all of the costs have been accounted for. Okay. If you look at the hyperlinks for these particular documents, if you click on the hyperlinks, it will take you right to the change document that you need to be working with. Okay. It will also take you to the payment requisition document that you need to be working with. There's a lot of cross-referencing that happens within the Contract Manager tool, and it happens in an automated fashion. It's not something that you need to create. Once you create the document, the system will create the log, and the system will create the tracking methods for you to go through and review these documents together in one financial overview. When you're all done with your contract and you've put your contract in place, it can be very important to make sure that a contract is executed. When we were working in the paper world prior to getting into a digital environment, which most people are moving to, we had signers. You signed off on the document, and then once everyone had signed off on it, then all the appropriate copies were distributed, and the executed copy was filed. And we're going to kind of follow that same process within the contract management tool and what's called the approval workflow. Okay? Prior to Contract Management version 12, there was no formal approval process. but in Contract Management version 12.1 and later, there is a new approval workflow, and the user has the option to use it or not use it at this point. I don't know how it will change in future versions, but for now, you can opt out of using it if you don't wish to. And what it will allow you to do is for all of your cost-related documents in contract management, your contracts, your change orders, purchase orders, RFIs, and payment requisitions, it will allow you to have series of approvals. It will allow you to have multiple reviewers, and it will track each individual reviewer's status so that one person can sign off and another person may not. They may reject the item. And then you can track the cycles of those reviews, and once everyone is in some approved state, then the document will actually be approved, and it will be locked so that only the person who has the approval rights will be able to make modifications going forward. All of the other users in your system that had edit rights to the document would then be locked out of the document because it would be in an approved state. So let's look at that in the tool. Okay, so here's your new approval workflow. You would have an assigned document owner. Okay, and please remember this is test data, so I don't have a lot of resources to pull from the way that you would have in your own user database. But I could add reviewers. Okay, and then I can tell the system what do I want it to do. Do I want to approve in sequence? That means all must approve, and they must approve in a particular order. All of them must approve, or they can approve in any order, or any of them can approve, and then the document will be approved. And this may change from document to document, and you have the permissions within your tool to be able to make that decision. Okay? For now, we'll just leave it as approve in sequence. I will click Initiate to initiate the review cycle. And then I should get a little warning that this document cannot be edited during the review process. So all of those users that have edit to this contract or edit to this purchase order prior to the review cycle will now be locked out, and you'll not be able to make an edit while the reviewer is reviewing it. Okay. And then each reviewer would then go in and do their review.
Hey, Marianne, we have a question. When would somebody know if they have a workflow that's assigned to them?
With the ball in court. I'm sorry, that's a great question. I should have mentioned that. All ball in court assignments will display in the actions box of your control center. Okay, and I didn't get into Control Center very much because we weren't doing a full overview of contract management, but that is an excellent question. So every time that you have a ball and court assignment on any document in Contract Manager, it will appear in your actions list. And what will happen is that when you click here, you will see all of the items where your name is the ball and court, and if you click on the particular document, it will take you right to that document, and you'll know what you need to do. Okay. Another thing that you can do that can be very helpful is when you open documents, you can utilize the inbox that's on your control center. So you could do select an action, send to inbox, and say, please review and approve, and send. And then when a user comes into Contract Manager at the beginning of their day, they can come right to their inbox, and they can see the particular item, and they can see a little sticky note. If they click on the sticky note, it will tell them what they need to do, and then they can click on the item that they need to review and approve and go in and make those adjustments. Okay. You will notice that once one of the reviewers have approved, but the other has not approved, the status of the document is open. Okay. Once the next approver goes in and approves, now the review cycle is complete and the status of the document has changed to approved. Okay. If I'm a user that does not have approval rights and I were to try to open this document, I have a warning that would say this document is approved. You do not have permissions to open it. Because I'm functioning as an administrator, I don't have the way to show you that right now, but I assure you it does happen. Okay. Any questions so far?
No more questions now.
Okay. While we're here, I want to show you something quickly in relation to this purchase order. I have a couple of line items within the purchase order, and in this case it happens to be a software purchase order. Please don't correlate my prices with the prices of the licenses themselves. There is no correlation. I'm a trainer and a consultant and not a salesperson, so please don't assume these to be correct. But what I want to show you is how it details into the materials management so that we can look at that very quickly. So if I click on the material hyperlink, I can see in my cost tab a detail of what I purchased, the quantity of what I purchased, the unit price of what I purchased, and the total. And then as you record delivery tickets, which is not going to be part of this demonstration from a detailed standpoint, but as you record delivery tickets, you could record them on your daily reports, you could record them manually. The system would then track what has been delivered so that in your payment requisitions, you could track your materials stored separate from your actual billing. So some of my customers do track material stored. So this is the way to allow you to do that. And then when things have been requisitioned or when they have been billed on a requisition, that would also be recorded here so that you can track your total amount of what you contracted or requested by a purchase order, and then what's been delivered, and then what's been billed, and your balance that's remaining, so that you can always track what's going on with your stored materials on your project. All right? And you would establish those hyperlinks at the contract or the purchase order level. Okay? And that shows in a little bit more detail on my slide. So for example, I have a detail excuse me, of the materials delivery record and then a sample report of all the materials delivery on my project so that I can track everything that has been delivered and what has been paid for, what has not been paid for, and the balances that is remaining on my materials stored. Okay. It's going to allow you to record the date and the quantity of the materials and then incorporate these and approve changes into your payment requisitions for up-to-date payment amounts. Right. You can pull these into your payment requisition in an automated fashion via Get Materials Stored in your payment requisition. Okay. Change management. Change management is going to encompass 3 modules within the cost information folder, or the contract information folder, and that's going to be the change management folder. The change management module, the proposals module, and the change order module. Okay. Within Contract Manager, you can perform change orders without creating a change management item or without creating a proposal document. You have permissions to do that if you've been set up appropriately in the system. Or you can use change management to manage the phases of change from proposal to final change order, which is what we have displayed here. So on the budgeted side, you would have an estimated phase. This is where you request the price for the change. Okay. You would have a quoted phase. This is where you would provide the quote or receive the quote, okay, that you would receive the information or the price for the change that's being recorded. This could also be represented in time as well as dollars. A negotiated phase of change is where you record the negotiation. If the original value is not agreed to by both parties, then you may need to go through some negotiated rounds of proposals to get to the final. And then your final phase is the actual change order document itself. The user has the ability to define what those documents are going to be called. And this is the phase of change where the original contract document is officially changed. All of these other phases of change would show up in the pending column of the cost worksheet. Only the documents in this phase, once it is approved, would show up in the approved column of the cost worksheet. Okay. So if we take a look at that detail on the cost worksheet. A pending change, pending commitment, okay, would show up as a change order document in a pending state. The document is not approved. If the document were approved, it would show in the approved revisions column. Okay. If we wanted to click on that change order, I can show you that it is not an approved document. Okay. Once it were to be approved, it would move from the pending column to the approved revisions column. If we look in approved commitment, here, here is your $10,000 change order. Sorry, purchase order. And the $2,500 and the $7,500 subtotaled is $10,000. So here's your change order for $2,500 against one set of licenses and the change order of $7,500 against the other set of licenses, and those together summarized are the $10,000 total for the change order. Okay, and again, any approved change orders or approved revisions show in the approved commitment column or approved budget column as appropriate. Lastly, we'll quickly look at payment requisitions. Within Oracle Primavera Contract Management, we utilize payment requisitions in the method of the AIA G702, G703 form. Okay, it's not required that if it's not required that you use a stamped AIA document, then you could certainly utilize this document and print it from within Contract Manager, and it has the look and feel of the AIA without the actual stamp. There's also a form fill form within the tool that you could print off so that you could put the AIA stamped form into your printer, and it is formatted to print appropriately on your form if that's something that is required. What this method does is it creates a scheduled value, then records your previous applications, everything that you've paid prior to this current period. It records the work that's completed this period or this billing cycle. It records your stored materials if you wish to be tracking those, the completed and stored to date, the percent complete of each line item, and then the overall percent complete of your project, and then the balance to finish of each line item as well as the balance to finish of your overall project. And then any retainage, and you have the ability to track retainage at a line item level or at a contract level. So that if you're holding some percentage of the entire contract for the life cycle of the project, you can track it that way. If you wish to withhold line item retainage, where certain line items would have retainage withholdings and other line items would not, again, that is acceptable, and you can track that type of retainage withholding within the Payment Requisitions module as well. Okay. Your G702 type form is going to be your cover sheet. This is where you're going to show the detail of your contract amounts, your change orders, where you stand to date, a breakdown of your change order values, the current amount due, the payment that you're requesting or is being requested, the balance, including your retainage payouts. And then the G703 type form, or the detail sheet, that's where you're going to get the breakdown of your schedule of values, the line item level detail for your payment document. Excuse me.
Hey, Marianne, I have a question here.
Uh-huh.
How the financial terms, such as budgeted, committed, and actual, will be different in case an owner is using the PCM to track project financial performance? I'm not sure I understand.
I think what they're asking is these cost worksheet columns are just labels. So if you're functioning as an owner and you're not functioning as a general contractor, for example, and this is not, you don't want to call this original budget, you can simply customize the text and you can call it whatever you want it to call it. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. I'm going to wait for another reply. Yes, it does.
Okay, great. So since these are column labels, you do have the ability to customize text throughout the entire tool. Just realizing that when you do customize the text, it will customize the text of all of the projects in your database. So every project would have to have the same text labels from one cost worksheet to another. Okay. There are workarounds. If you need multiple types of scenarios, then you may have to think about multiple databases, but that gets into the a little bit more installation type of talk. But yes, all of the labels for the columns can be modified to use your own terms and your own verbiage.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so let's look here at my budget contract. And in my budget contract, in my contract summary, I can see that I have a payment requisition. Payment requisition number 1 is dated August 30th of 2009. And so we'll go and take a look at what this payment requisition looks like. Okay. In the requisition summary, here's the detail of my original contract value, my net change, my contract sum to date, completed and stored to date, my retainage withholding bank, my total earned less retainage, previous amount certified, the current payment due, and the balance to finish including the retainage. What % complete on this project do I happen to be? Okay. So all of this detail is what then creates the cover page of your document that I'll show you how it prints into a form. Within the schedule of values, I have all of my breakdown for my schedule of values. Okay. Here's my total. Sum total is the $10 million contract, and again, it's broken down in various line items on my payment application. What was paid previously, since this is payment application number 1, there's nothing in the previous paid column. In the this period column, I have $307,426.91 that I'm requesting payment for. Now, that's not my current payment due. Okay, my current payment due, excuse me, is the $276,684.22 because I am withholding $30,000 in retainage. So we want to make sure that when we calculate that we're realizing that 307 is what we've spent, 296 is what we're writing a check for, and there is a difference. But as far as the system is concerned, it is calculating what you've spent, and then it will show you what you're withholding in retainage in a separate retainage bucket. Okay. If I had any materials stored, it would show here, completed and stored to date values, % complete values of each line item, the balance to finish, retainage. In this case, I'm holding retainage at a contract lump sum level and not at a line item level. So it's showing here on my requisition summary, but it is not showing on my detailed line items. And that's the way you want it. You want it to show one place or the other, but never both. If I had any tax, I would have that information here. And then the cost codes that these particular line items have been allocated to within the cost worksheet. So I'm going to go and look at the cost worksheet and show you that value in just a moment. If you're working with P6 and you're integrated with your scheduling tool, again, you can align these line items with an activity ID in P6 so that that information can be recorded together. Okay.
Marianne, another question, and I think this goes back, but can PCM track the budgeted costs with respect to fiscal calendar years?
I'm not sure I understand what that question means.
Okay.
Fiscal calendar year would be maybe the business runs their company from October 1st to September 31st or July 1 to June 30th like the city county government. So,
okay. What's going to happen with the way to answer that question is this. The cost worksheet will show where you are current to date. This will always show to date. However, you could potentially create a cost worksheet report by going into advanced print. And there are many, many reports, over 300 reports that come out of the box with the software. Plus, you will get the InfoMaker tool with version 13 and earlier, and the BI Builder tool with version 14 and later for creating your own custom reports. And within running one of those reports, you could put in a date criteria, and you could run the report against that date criteria, and it would only show you the cost as related to that date criteria. And I'll show you an example of a report here in just a moment. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. And so it's really small. So here's an example of your cost worksheet. And so here are your breakdowns, and here are your budgeted amounts, your committed amounts, your actual amounts, your variance amounts, etc. And a date criteria could be applied to this report and written as a custom report, and then you would just pull the cost as related to that particular time frame. Okay. But the actual cost worksheet itself, will always show in real time where you stand current to date. And once all of the money from your budget has been allocated, then you would show your variance columns to be $0. Some companies work that way. They want everything allocated, and that's the way that they work. Some, their variance columns, they don't call them variance columns. They call them some sort of profit margin columns. And so however you wish to name and align these columns, the function is still going to be the same, but you may change the verbiage to match your terms and how you perform your work. What I wanted to show you when we were finishing up with the payment requisition is if I go into the detail of that particular cost code for the summary cost, and I look at the actuals, I can see here in my payment requisition, here's my requisition against a particular contract. Here's the document related to the requisition. This is what line item that this happens to be billed on. And on payment requisition number 1, dated August 30th of 2009, there's the $60,000 that I billed against that particular item. So what the cost worksheet is always allowing you to do is to display multiple payment requisitions, multiple contracts, multiple purchase orders, and summarize them by cost code within your cost worksheet. This gives you a full overview of where you stand to date on all of your contracts, all of your purchase orders, all of your payment requisitions against a single contract. Okay? You can create different layouts so that you may be able to see your information in different ways. So just because the cost worksheet displays like this in this particular layout, I can change it. I can say I just want to see a budget quick view. I just want to know where I am with my budget specifically. So I would then create the columns that are specific to just my budget, and I can see this information here. So here's my original budget, my approved budget revisions, my revised budget, my pending budget revisions, and my projected budget, and then my actuals issued. These are the bills that I've sent to my owner if I'm functioning as a general contractor. If I were functioning as an owner, I'm probably not sending any bills to myself, so I might not need an actuals issued column. I may just need an actuals received column. Okay? If I can do a commitment quick view the same way, I can just show the commitments and the columns related to the commitments so that I can track this type of information. Okay? Maybe I want to organize by CSI and spec. So in this case, I told you in the beginning that we're organized by division, then by spec section, then by cost category. So I can create a custom grouped report right within Contract Manager to be able to view my information and summarize it in a little bit different look and feel. Okay? And if I hit collapse all, you will see that I am now subtotaled by division, okay, within the overall cost worksheet. And then within each division, I have the various spec sections and the cost assigned to each spec section. Okay? And again, further subtotals. And the really neat thing about this version of Contract Manager is you can hit a Send to Excel button. There's a little icon here, if everyone can see that. It's called Send to Excel. And every time I do an update with Microsoft, it changes the way things work. So I apologize. Let me try that one more time. Okay. Now it's going to throw me out completely. I apologize. It will take you to Excel, and it will create a log form. And if you'll forgive me for just one moment, I think I can find it. Yes. Let's see if it populated. It didn't. I apologize. That's completely my fault. I did some Microsoft updates last night, and something's not working in Excel. But what will happen is it will take that log exactly as it looks in Contract Manager, all of the display, complete extraction of the data. It will put it into an Excel format, and then you would be able to modify it in Excel. You're not able to update it in Excel and then import it directly back into Contract Manager. But it does allow the average user the ability to extract the data from Contract Manager, put it into Excel or something that they're a little bit more familiar with, and allow them to format and create their own custom report within the Excel tool. I do truly apologize that I can't seem to show you that right now. But it does work. And every log layout that you have, you will be able to do that. You could go in and you could create any of your log layouts, and you could send those to Excel, and the data would extract exactly the way that it looks in Contract Manager, and it would appear in Excel appropriately. To make that function, you do have to have Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel installed on the server prior to installing Contract Manager, and you have to make sure that you're using the appropriate compatible version of Microsoft Office with the appropriate compatible version of Oracle Primavera Contract Management. Okay, so you want to make sure you check your compatibility documents when you're working with that.